and I'm delighted that you've all come into the dark of this beautiful day, but you will not be sorry, because we're very excited about this event here this evening, and I know that there's a large audience watching this through our streaming service on YouTube, I think, and you can also in the chat box send in questions, which we will I can moderate at the Q&A as well. So anyway, so just to give you a bit of background and a bit of context, New Now Next is a series of talks which is curated by the Irish Architecture Foundation and sponsored by ARAP. It's now in its 10th season, and over the years we've amassed an incredible archive of speakers from around the world. My name is Natalie Wadick, and I'm director of the Irish Architecture Foundation. And for members of the audience who are visually impaired, my self-description is I am white, Irish, female, age 52, with grey short hair and wearing a black jacket and black trousers. The Irish Architecture Foundation is a not-for-profit cultural agency passionate about creating open platforms to discuss the most essential issues. So, the 10th series of New Now Next this year, we decided to theme it around activism, and we really want to explore how architecture can be a central force in affecting change around spatial equality and sustainable urban development. And it's kind of interesting, when we were putting this together, I was drawn to the vision of the Irish Architecture Foundation, which is something you'll find on page 2 of our website, where it says, and this would have taken a lot of people a lot of time to write this, we believe in an Ireland where architecture is a civic right, fundamental to the fabric of our life, culture and history. And like all visions, they need to be, or have to be, aspirational, but we in the IF have to believe that this is possible, and we are driven by that aspiration, even though in reality, in the built environment, access is not a given for all. Just another little anecdote. The year before last, because I can't remember how the years have passed over the past 2 years, the beginning of lockdown, in the IF, we decided that we needed to commission a fit-for-purpose audience development strategy that prioritizes access to our audience, because in the IF, I don't know if you've heard me talk before, we have large audiences for architecture, which is wonderful and a great thing to celebrate. However, I wasn't sure whether we were deepening or diversifying our audience, so we focused our attention on the people that we have not been engaging with, and opened up a must-needed conversation with them around the Irish Architecture Foundation and around architecture in general. And we are learning so much, and we are passing on that learning. And we believe that we must advocate within the sector for our partners and stakeholders to think about how everyone can engage equally with architecture and understand the benefits of doing so. So that whole process of an audience development strategy became something more. It came more about architecture and our relationships with the stakeholders and people who create the built environment. And this evening is part of that objective. And so the title of tonight's talk is called Disability, Space and Architecture. And it'll take a different form than our usual New Now Next. It'll be more conversational. We will have 2 speakers on stage, but first we'll have Jos Boys, who will discuss the work of the DisOrdinary Architecture Project. And Jos will introduce Richard Dougherty, an architect, and he will speak, and then both will sit on stage and have a conversation. At this point, you're all invited to join in that conversation. Please do. And we'll see how it goes from there. So I'm going to introduce Jos, and then it's over to you, Jos. So Jos is co-founder with Zoe Partington of the DisOrdinary Architecture Project, which brings disabled artists into architectural education and practice to critically and creatively rethink access and inclusion. Originally trained in architecture, she was co-founder of Matrix Feminist Architecture and Research Collective in the 1980s, and one of the authors of Making Space, Women and the Man-Made Environment from 1980, or it says here 1894, but I think it's 1984. Currently, she is director of the Learning Environments, Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Centre at the Bartlett University College London in the UK, and programme lead for the MSc Learning Environments. She is author of Doing Disability Differently, an alternative handbook on architecture, disability and designing for the everyday. She is editor of Disability Space Architecture, a reader by Routledge from 2017. So here you go.
Hi everyone, I'm just going to move the furniture. Sorry about that. My name's Jos Boys, and Richard and I, we both like to move around quite a lot on stage, so we thought that we'd just make that possible. I go first, and I'm going to talk about the DisOrdinary Architecture Project, and then Richard will follow. Richard Dougherty, who I had enormous pleasure to work with on a very recent DisOrdinary Architecture project, and he will talk about that, but also about the experience of being a deaf architect and various other things. So, yes, thank you. So, what is the DisOrdinary Architecture Project? Natalie very kindly introduced it. It was started up in about 2008 as a kind of informal platform, bringing together disabled artists, many different very creative disabled artists, and with the aim really of thinking about how you might deal with access and inclusion in a very different way to the way that it's normally dealt with. And it's now, I guess there's probably 15, 20 artists who work on a lot of different projects, and then many others who come in for different particular activities. And our strapline, which we've had since 2008, is that we promote activity that develops and captures models of new practice for the built environment, led by the creativity and experiences of disabled artists. And that notion of models of new practice is kind of really important. We don't do access consultancy. We don't kind of say, oh, let's go into that building and work out what's wrong with it and tell you what to do. We do a little bit about that, but we don't do it that way. We're really interested in thinking about how you might do it in much more creatively by enjoying the kind of richness of our human neuro and biodiversity rather than ignoring it. So, as everyone in the room probably knows, the kind of way, if you study architecture, this is what you learn about disability. You learn these kind of templates. You learn kind of functional solutions to the problem of disability. And I think where we started was the problem something else. The problem is how we think about ability and disability in this incredibly limited binary way. So it doesn't have a kind of history to it. It's not something that's interesting to theory. It's not theorized in architecture and built environment education and practice. And it's kind of just really straightforward. It's like, you are disabled or you're not, which we all know not to be the case. When you learn to be a designer, you see it as being this kind of technical problem that you deal with at the end of the design process. So what you actually do, you learn to design normal environments. You hardly ever do anything to do with non-normative people in your first degree, but you design for normal people, and then right at the end you retrofit for all the people you've already left out, which is a kind of, I just think it's really weird that we go on doing that and that we've been doing it for so long. So that has lots of unintended consequences. It means that the people who learn to be designers, they learn not to use their brain or their creativity when they're thinking about disability. They see it just as something that's very banal, and often something that's seen as a limitation on the design process. They don't think about it in relationship to history or theory or technology or any sorts of things where it might be quite interesting to think about the variety of human bodies and human minds. And the other thing that happens is disabled people themselves who actually have a lot of, they have to have a lot of expertise in negotiating the built environment. They're experts, but they're not treated like that. They're treated as rather passive users. And then there's a bigger context, which I won't go on about very much, but I think it's really important, and that is, in everyday life, we still have an idea that disability is a kind of individualized medical problem. It's a kind of deficit. You know, it's something you don't want. It's something, if you're not disabled, it's kind of quite frightening. Kind of like, oh my God, it must be terrible. And when you study architecture, I would suggest that the word that gets used a lot is empathy. We should have empathy for people who have disabilities and impairments. And I think that I got into this through getting very involved with disability studies, with the kind of scholarship, with the creativity of disability arts, and of disability activism, and seeing that as the only non-disabled person in the DisOrdinary Architecture Project, that I'm kind of complicit. We're all complicit, us non-disabled people, in allowing that to continue to happen. And in the kind of disability activist world, people don't talk about access and inclusion. They talk about social, spatial, and material justice. So they talk about something that's much more powerful and political. So if we're not doing that, what are we doing? Well, we're aiming to start from this kind of the richness of this creativity of non-normative people and thinking about all the variety in that and what that implies. This is one of my favorite projects, which is, unfortunately, Catherine Aronello is no longer with us, but Aaron Williamson, who's a deaf artist, works quite a lot with DisOrdinary. And they had this whole idea of the disabled avant-garde today. And the kind of a huge joke in it was, if you're disabled, you can't possibly be avant-garde. It's just not kind of, it's sort of not how people think. And I think part of the original idea of DisOrdinary architecture was, how do you make social change? Well, you start by something being really cool. It's like what everybody wants to do. And then that happens so much that it just becomes mainstream. So we were really interested in how you can make disability, which is seen so negatively in the built environment professions and in education, how you can make it something really cool to be interested in, and how you can make it something really cool to design around as a kind of creative generator and as a critical challenge to kind of normativity. So I want to give a big call out to all the amazing disabled artists that DisOrdinary has been able to work with, the activists, and they're kind of vital. And we can talk about that a bit more. And I also want to make a big call out to a huge amount of really interesting work written by scholars in this field, many of them themselves disabled. Okay, so what does that lead us to? Where does that get us? Well, it leads to some questions. So this, I think, is what really motivates me. These questions motivate me in everything that I do. They, in a way, relate back to the feminist practice that I was involved in. What kinds of bodies and minds are valued in the design of our built surroundings? Who is enabled and who is disabled? And that doesn't just need to be around, disability, physical or mental or whatever. You can be disabled for lots of other reasons. It's a kind of useful phrase about how built space works better for some people and not others. How it just assumes certain sorts of bodies and not others. And then, how does that happen? Why is that just the norm? Zoe and I met in 2008, as I said, and we were just having one of those rants about how stuff around access and inclusion, it's moved on in some ways, but really, in terms of making it something that's enjoyable and creative, it hasn't moved on at all. And that was really around this idea that there's a set of, everyday life, the way that people think in everyday life, as well as the way that we create buildings and spaces, the way that we encounter each other, all those things act to perpetuate particular kinds of spaces and not others. So we're really interested in how you might begin to make those other sorts of spaces. How might you do that? What are those spaces? They're spaces in the mind, they're spaces, physical spaces. what are the things you need to do? So what are the creative and critical tools that we can use to remake built space that values and builds on its diverse forms of occupation? That's like what we're at. But having said that, we start from trying to rethink the kind of terminology that you might use, and we also start very much from the everyday, from our own everyday bodies, from the very particularities of space that we occupy. You know, the fact that I'm up here and you're down there, it's deliberate. Rather than talk about disability and ability, we often use the expression fit and misfit. So it's not so much that you are somebody who uses a wheelchair, or you're deaf, or you're blind, but particular sorts of environments fit you, or they don't fit you. And it gives you a kind of sense, a really relational sense. Probably everybody in this room has been in spaces that they feel like they don't really fit in, they misfit in. And this comes from somebody called Rosemary Garland Thompson. And what she says is, if you do fit, you don't really notice stuff. It's very smooth. You just, you know, it just happens around you. You don't have to notice things. But if you don't fit, then you have to notice everything, because it's likely to come up and bite you. And so that can be very frustrating and exhausting, but it's also fantastically creative. So that's the kind of framework that we use. And then this idea of the everyday, what is it about the everyday, where we can begin to kind of think through, because we're so used to it. It's the concrete world around us. It makes things seem so normal and obvious that we don't unpick it. So I collect quite a lot of pictures of things that just twist those things around. So I love this one because it's a group of men queuing to go to the toilet. And every single woman who went into the ladies laughed out loud as she went past those men. She went, and they're all like shuffling because they've never had to do it before. And they just don't notice that women have to do it all the time. I love this one. This is a much older woman who needs to sit down on her shopping. So she appropriates her cycle rack. So she says something about, who is this space built for? It's built for, and the statistics show, young men who cycle, and it's not built for an older woman who just needs to have a sit down. And this is a wonderful project by Sophie Handler with some older women in the East End called Resistant Seating, where she just worked with those women to talk about where they did sit down on their way to the shops and what kind of designs what sort of things might help them with that. So this is Sybil, and this is Sybil's cushion, because she always sits on this bollard and it's very unpleasant, uncomfortable, but she needs to sit down on it. And then Sophie did these wonderful drawings, which are just like, sort of almost like an ironic joke on the way that architects draw things. This is Liz Crow, who we have the great privilege to work with a huge amount. And she did a project with us and with somebody called Julia Dwyer at the University of Westminster called Tilted Horizons. And that carries forward this thing about needing not just to sit down, but to lie down. She has a long-term chronic illness. And so this project was called Tilted Horizons because it was about how arranging yourself differently in a space has all sorts of ramifications, that sitting down can be a problem, that lying down can be a problem. People used to move her on all the time because they were in public space because they thought she was homeless or drunk. So she's really interested in what those social encounters might be and how you might shift them. And so the students were just asked to investigate spaces around themselves and find places to lie down and think about what the conditions are. What is it that you need to do that? What is it that makes that a restful space? Another artist that we work with who does something similar called Raquel Mezegue, she has this whole project going you can see online called A Crash Course in Cloud Spotting, which you can join in on. But she's also working with the city of Coventry to make it a city of rest. So this idea of a restful city, what happens to the design of a city if it's somewhere where you can just rest or lean or move out of the flow? What would that be like? It's a very small thing. It could be a lot of very small adaptations, but it's kind of nice. And it's about slowing things down. It's actually quite political. We all run around. Well, you may not, but I think we do. We all run around. It's like we're all under this pressure to be on the move all the time. So I think that's kind of a really nice project. And just connected to that, this was a project, that's Zoe Partington in the middle, John Adams, who's an autistic artist, and Naomi Lackmeyer sitting down. We did a project at the Royal Academy of Arts, which was just about finding places to sit and to escape the crowds. And I cannot tell you, I had to fend off so many people saying, it's terrible when you go to an art gallery or a museum, there's nowhere to sit down. They sort of treated it as if it was that I was to blame, really, for this. And this is an amazing woman called Jess Tom, who goes by the name of Tourette's Hero, who's been working with Battersea Arts Centre to look at how you might have more relaxed performances. We're very used in these sort of settings that if somebody makes inappropriate noises, that it's kind of uncomfortable. It's like, you know you're not meant to do that. But if it's a space where it's just like whatever, you know that's going to happen, it works better for everybody. And the whole relaxed venue methodology, I think, is really, really interesting and available. You can look at the Battersea Arts Centre website and see what they do. I'm listening quite a lot of other people's projects because there's so much going on, but it kind of doesn't connect. It doesn't get connected into mainstream activity, I think. This is something called Mapping Access by Amy Hamray in the States, which is really thinking about how you might gather complicated data from lots and lots of different people about their access needs, and then think about how you dealt with that information. So instead of having a technical solution, like a one solution suits everybody, which is what the building regulations do, how might you have a different process that accepts that this is really complicated, that there's lots of contradictions into people's different access needs, but that if we treat it as a kind of form of collective care, then we can work together to do the best that we can. And a great project, again, I'm just throwing these out at you, but I do, this is in New York City, and it's called Access is Love, and I think if you come from the architecture and built environment professions, the notion that access is love is actually quite radical. So I just wanted to give a bit of a clearer idea of how we take that forward in DisOrdinary, and we use this expression breaching quite a lot. So there's kind of everyday activities, and we just do them and we don't even think about them. But if we deliberately disrupt them or shift them, then suddenly certain sorts of things come into focus. And we do that through all sorts of kind of interactive workshops with students, with practitioners, with clients, with users, just really that comes out of, they're quite foundational. They're about actually taking notice of your own body and thinking about what's going on in terms of how you use space and how you might disrupt it. And I can talk a bit more about that later. So to go back to Liz Crow as an example of that, she has a long-running project, She has a long-running project which is about taking her bed into public spaces. Because if you have a chronic illness, what you tend to do is you pass. You hide it, you go out into public, you perform like, quote-unquote, a normal person, and then you have to recover in bed for like 3 days. And that process means that for able-bodied people, they never have to take any notice or support those people or be part of this bigger picture. And she decided that she would make it clear. She would bring her bed into a public space and see what that suggested. And part of what's lovely about that is that when she works with us, the whole space of the classroom or the seminar shifts. And one of the things that she's shown, and she's just finished her PhD, is that having somebody, that's a completely different way that a seminar works if you have somebody lying down. She says it just opens up. Everything gets much more relaxed. It opens up what people say. It's just as engaging and important, but it has a completely huge impact on the way that people relate to each other. And we do it, I I'm not going to do it here, but I do have a version of a lecture which basically ends up with everybody lying on the ground. There's lots of intermediate activities in that, but it's like, why are we doing this? Why are we doing it like this? Doesn't mean it's wrong, but like, could we unpick it a bit? That kind of everyday activity, this is Aaron Williamson, the deaf artist I mentioned before, although of course you can't see. He takes that forward, really. He worked with some students at the Architectural Association in London, and they just deconstructed the whole business of how you learn to be an architect in a way that was really lively and interesting. And then this project, I think, for me, is really, really kind of expresses something about what DisOrdinary is trying to do. I feel like it's a really moving things on from, you know, we've been taking quite a lot of time. A lot of all these things that we do comes out of the artist's creative practice. So all the time we're testing what the situation is, what's happening, how effective it is in kind of shifting attitudes, and trying to kind of do it slowly. And I think this is a version which really begins to move things on. So it's a foundation course for blind or visually impaired people that we organise with the Bartlett School of Architecture. This was before I ended up working there. And it's not just to get more blind or visually impaired people into architecture. It's to say, maybe we have different design methods. Maybe architecture's so fixated on the visual and on drawings and all the other things. If you draw a building, you don't have a way of representing sound or smell, touch. It's kind of automatically quite visual. So those things often get left out. And this is Carlos Pereira, who's a blind architect from Portugal. And then this is Chris Downey, a blind architect from New York. And we run this foundation course. The pandemic stopped it, but we've been running it, and we'll be running it again this year, which both supports blind and visually impaired people who want to be architects, but also really explores different ways of working, all of it led by blind and visually impaired artists and architects. And one thing that comes up, this is Mandy Redrose-Rowe, the white woman on my side of the screen. She's one of the tutors on the course, and she, with Sade Abdul, the black woman on the other side, they co-designed a space together using Lego and performance. So they performed the space. They used audio description. They described to us what it would be like. They didn't draw it at all. And that was just the most fantastic experience. And on that same particular workshop, this is Duncan Murding, who's a blind craftsman from Tasmania, and he worked with a group of students in the workshop to design something called a box of feelings. There's Mandy again, multitasking. Using machine tools and producing the most gorgeous bits of work. And that too deconstructed the way that these subjects normally get taught, because in the end, the review of this student's work took place under a table, because it was the best way to see the way that the light worked. Okay, I've almost finished. I just wanted to talk about a couple of kind of building-related schemes, which ties into what Richard, I hope, will talk about, because generally DisOrdinary has not done things that might be considered sort of architectural projects, but right in the early days, we were involved with Matthew Lloyd Architects for doing this water-powered lift as a way of providing access in a very historic London site, and doing it in a way which was very celebratory. It wasn't trying to hide it. It enabled the possibility of moving up this huge flight of steps in a way that everybody might want to do, because as you go up or down very slowly, you're looking out over the park. It's very close to the Buckingham Palace. And the water's coming by you, so you've got the sound of the water coming by you. So it's the idea is to make it access a beautiful experience that everybody wants. And this is not by us, although we were a bit connected, but it's by some really interesting architects called Manilow and White. And they came to us because they had already won a competition, not by drawing it, but by doing an audio description of it. So they talked about the building, and they'd use that as a way of thinking about it really differently. And then when they won the competition, we were involved with them in embedding disabled artists into the design process. And it's a youth community centre in Neath in Wales. So, most recently, and almost by accident, at the same time as I had the huge joy of meeting Richard Dougherty here and Chris Lang, both deaf architects, we got asked by a theatre company a festival company in Germany to work with them on, to design a theatre pavilion for them. And we used DisOrdinary Architecture techniques. We did workshops, which I think Richard will talk about. And I guess this project will be realized finally at the end of this month. So that's really, really exciting. And I definitely want to leave Richard to be the one who talks about that. So, thank you.
First of all, can I thank the AIF and for the invitation to come along this evening. It is a real privilege to be here. Can I thank my interpreter, Janet, for traveling with me to be here as well and interpret for me. Let me just start off by introducing myself. I'm Richard. I was born profoundly deaf. I've been like this all my life. And I really hadn't understood that for how much shape, for myself, I hadn't really understood how much shape had influenced who I am, and that sense of shape. But on reflection, when I was 7 or 8 years old, my family used to go to a country house in the area of Downpatrick, middle of nowhere, and there was one night, I always remember, there was a power cut. Well, what happens in a power cut is the light goes off. I don't hear, and I also become blind because I don't see. So by touching walls, touching everybody around me, I ran downstairs, and everyone naturally gravitated towards the fire. It was an open fire in the kitchen. My parents were there, and they brought in the candles they could find. We got the fire lit, and my family gathered, 4 brothers and sisters, gathered around the fire with those candles. And that experience really brought home for me the power of social infrastructure, where the simple act of lighting a fire brings people together. And when people are together, they communicate. We use candles for me to see people's mouths, to see their facial expression. I'm the only deaf person in my family, so I was lip reading to see them. But that experience will stay for me for the rest of my life. And it brings me to this painting that's up on screen right now. 19th century painting by a Dutch painter, Joseph Israel. And that relates to a lot of the story that I just gave you and a lot of my childhood. It's such a simple painting of a peasant woman. But you can see the social infrastructure. You see that she's sitting beside a fire. The fire is creating energy for her to cook around. A table is positioned at the window. She has her back to the window. In any house that I go into, I have to have my back to the window so that I can see the light projected onto people's faces. And then I can lip read better, or I can watch signing. If it's the other way around, then the person's in shadow and I can't see them at all to communicate. And I think there's a real texture to this painting as well, because the wicker basket is there. That brings something to it. The different elements in that painting, from a woman who looks like a peasant woman, show us that the whole is greater than the sum of each of the parts. There's an intimacy created by the way this home has been designed. And my concern is that in the built environment, we've lost that intimacy because what we're looking at are big, open, complex spaces that lose that sense of intimacy. This is a photograph of my daughter. You can see that she's touching the wall of an arts centre in Belfast called the Mac Arts Centre. She's touching the walls. Like her daddy, she is also deaf. At that stage, she was 14 months old, but she was already developing a sense of touch, navigating the world through touch, engaging with the world. The fact that she's deaf isn't important here. What's important is she's navigating the world. She's touching what she needs to do. We had board mark concrete here. That's what we did to texture the walls. She's touching that. You can see that she's looking at the shadows. She's getting to feel what's beneath her fingers. And that image speaks to me so much about how deaf people occupy space in a way that's different from those of you who aren't deaf. We navigate the world in a different way. My wife is from Dublin, and she's also deaf. But the difference between us is that I come from a family where I was the only deaf person. She comes from a family where everyone was deaf. And their house, for me, was beautiful to go into. It's Contact. They live in South Dublin, and I loved going into her family home. Every time I went in, I loved it. There was no sound, everybody was using sign language, and everything was set up in a way that they could see each other. Everybody in her extended family is deaf, her parents, all her brothers, partners, and so everybody's using Irish Sign Language all the time. And every time I went in, I felt relaxed. I didn't have to make the effort to try and lip read. I could take my hearing aids off, throw them in a corner somewhere, and relax. And for me, it always felt like coming home. They bought that house in 1985. I think the original house was built in 1935, post-war era, round about then. But this is the original design of the house. It would have been quite dark, quite damp, quite small, boxy rooms, kitchen, basically a cupboard, external views very limited. Over time, they adapted it. So if I'm going to show you a series of plans, so a few years later, what has happened is, initially, they couldn't hear the doorbell, and these days, they didn't have flashing doorbells like we might have now. So they put in sight lines, so you could see through. You can see there, they've broken down walls, they've put sight lines in so they could see people at the front door from anywhere. You can see they've added in a view of the exterior out to the garden. And this beautiful structure, absolutely beautiful, where the walls were all constructed in such a way that you could see. And I loved going in because they had light actually coming in through the roof so that you could see faces really clearly. It faced north, and the lighting in that house was incredible, which again encouraged us to see each other and to facilitate communication. And the final one is, this family loved to party. I had so many parties in this house where multiple deaf people all arrived in. It was amazing. And the thing about, culture is that when deaf people come together, well, I think it's probably everyone's house, where do people end up? In the kitchen. You spend a lot of time, don't you, cleaning every room in the house, but everyone gravitates towards the kitchen. I think for many people it is. But particularly when you're deaf and there's room, sometimes furniture constricts space and you can't communicate that. So I know as deaf people, we always ended up in the kitchen because there was room to see each other and to sign. And as a result, the kitchen was extended and made larger. It wasn't an open plan house. And I don't want to give that impression. Just the rooms were adapted in such a way so that the visual lines were clear. They made simple adjustments. They moved the washing machine, the dishwasher out to the utility area, because when you're deaf, vibration is an issue. So those vibrating machines were put out into another area, leading to a more peaceful kitchen. They had mirrored textures. The washbacks, the splashbacks were mirrored so that you could see people signing behind you. All sorts of tiny little details put in to make that house feel like at home. A house where I could go in, be comfortable, and a house that adapted over the years to suit the way of being of the people who occupied that building. This is a photo of Gallaudet University in Washington, D.C. I have worked on that project with Hall McKnight since 2016. And Gallaudet University tells us a really interesting story. It's a symbol of where the deaf community all want to be. It's an incredible place. University for deaf people. The building was designed by Frederick Olmsted, who designed Central Park in New York in 1850, more or less. But 1850 was an awful time to be deaf because in America they were flirting with the idea of eugenics, about sterilization for people who were disabled, because they didn't want these horrible disabled people to be filling the planet and going everywhere. I'm a father of 2 deaf children. Appalling for me. It's only how many years ago? 150? When we think that that was an approach, that's harrowing for me to even think about. Gallaudet University was built in that area, and there's a lot of white man ideology about being superior, which has been given into deaf people, which tells deaf people that they have to learn to speak, because everybody else speaks, so they have to speak too. Gallaudet became the bastion where sign language survived and thrived. And really, this paradigm shift that we have now is Gallaudet started to promote the idea of deaf gain. And Jos has talked earlier on about some of the ideas around other architects. But I can remember when I was growing up going to hospital, and the doctor would always say to my parents, you know, on diagnosis they would say, I'm really sorry, you've got a deaf child. That's awful. That's deaf loss. And their hearing isn't very good. You know, they can only hear this percentage in this ear and that percentage in that ear. That's an awful loss for parents to have. But I'm born the way I am. I haven't lost anything. I don't feel like I've lost anything. The deaf gain paradigm challenges that notion of loss to one that says that, and Gallaudet really helped us think through this, a core belief that deaf gain has principles behind it that can benefit everybody. 2 of the main writers behind this theory said, it's so important for the world to develop an ecosystem which is thriving on biodiversity. Biodiversity is where we have a range of organisms that all contribute to protecting the planet. When you reduce biodiversity, then actually you're more at threat. And it's the same with society. We need to have diversity to protect society. Really good example of that biodiversity argument is that in the time of the famine in Ireland, they only had 2 different types of potatoes. They were always used all the time. No other species of potatoes, always 2 types of potatoes. And eventually what happened was those 2 types degraded, and then they weren't growing, and people then had a famine. There was no potato. And so people then emigrated, and we know the rest of the story from that. With a biodiverse approach, you would have lots of different species being grown, lots more available, and that is protective of the system. So that's what we need to have in society in general. When I talk about deaf culture, I just find it fascinating because if you look at these 2 pictures, look at the one on the right. The 2 individuals in the front are right beside each other. The 2 at the back are deaf. They are communicating in sign language, so they need a little bit of space. Can you see that? Jos is actually the one at the front, talking to another guy. They're close together, and I'm behind. There's a bit of space between us, just because we need to see each other to be able to sign effectively. And then if you look at this other picture, you see that group? There's one group, they're all close together, and this other group in a wider circle. They're deaf people using sign language who've spaced out to see each other. And so there is a preferred approach that we like to be able to see each other. We like circles, we don't want boxes, we like round tables, we want to be sitting in round spaces. And so Gallaudet University came up with a set of deaf space principles. They carried out research from deaf people from all around the globe and came up with 150 design principles. And built on proximity, built on material contact, the type of materials being used, visual clarity, all sorts of principles. And what has come out of that is a series of principles which are not just useful for deaf people. They're useful for everyone to have an environment that suits everyone, because these principles actually are universal. So Gallaudet actually went ahead and built a residential unit, and they used deaf space principles to develop that. So you can see that there's a little bit more space in the hallway, just widened out a little bit. The visual lines are very clear, permeable. You can see right across, you can see up, you can see down. And what's really important here is the colors are warm, blue, green, and they all are colors that are relaxing and contrast as well with what's behind, so that it's very clear what you're looking at. The ramp comes up slowly. The textiles are all part of this. The chairs are designed so that you can sign easily, the arms aren't getting in your way, all that kind of thing. So Jos already introduced this Theatre for Men festival that we have been involved in as a project in designing a space. We were approached about doing this in Braunschweig in Germany, which is over just to the west of Berlin. And they asked us to develop some kind of place where people could come get information, where there would be a bar, where we could provide some very simple outdoors furniture for people to come and make it a space that people would come and feel comfortable in. And a large part of what Jos and I went into in terms of developing this project was, and that's been part of my learning for working with Gallaudet, was that we, at the very start of the project, we brought in people who would be the end users of the design process at the beginning, before we designed. So often the design process brings in people after the design's been made. We brought them in before we'd done the designs. So we went out in January. We insisted on meeting people who were disabled artists, a whole range of people, to get their ideas, their feedback. We walked the site in and around this square, and we really benefited from the diversity of the people who came, their input for them. This wasn't work for them. This was so fascinating. They engaged really well with the process. I mean, it was a really fabulous location. 2 major theatres close by, but the square itself was a space that felt cold. It felt less than human. Cobbled paving, which is really not suitable if you're in a wheelchair or if you have any kind of mobility issue at all. So we went in, had the workshop, then came back to our respective bases and thought through what came out of that feedback. Very similar to the process I'd been through in Gallaudet in America. And now bear in mind, what I talked about, the ideology of eugenics, is about cleansing the race. It's about cleansing the people, about ensuring that you get rid of the people that you don't want around. Cleanse yourselves from them. And obviously you had the Aryan race happening in certain contexts as well. So the ethos was, how do we move from an approach which is cleansing through to clearing? The idea behind clearing is one that I've worked on a lot with Gallaudet. For me personally, for years and years, disabled people are kept away from the design process. They're kept out of the way. They're kept off center. We need to change this perspective to say, let's bring everybody into the light. Why do they need to be hidden? Bring them into the light. Create a clearing. Now this square used to have a forest associated with, and we thought about the idea of a clearing. If you think of a clearing in a forest, it's the first place that quite often civilization will come together. It's in a clearing. So who's going to take over the space? Is it just going to be people who will go everywhere else? How are we going to make it suitable? We had a lot of thought and a lot of thinking around that. And one word that came up in our discussions was maluma, which means soft curves. We wanted everything to be curved. It's organic. It's around a flow, being organic. And that was the term that we used a lot. So these are conceptual drawings. We started off with a square, which was bland. The idea of a clearing, which is a circle, bringing people in, a place of light, and then analysing the sociolinguistic patterns of how people communicate. So for me as a deaf person, navigating space, ensuring that everybody can see each other, and you maybe can't see that very much, but this is about having different loops, different centres, places where people can see each other. So the festival centre we've imagined has a place which is the centre of the clearing, and that's where people can gather. A bit like I showed you where deaf people naturally go into a circle, we designed circular spaces. There's an inner space, and then peripherally around that, it's a different type of space, and it's thinking about liminal space, where people can look at this inner space, maybe explore that, negotiate it, go in, and they're right inside, they get to the clearing. The middle of the clearing is where we imagine there would be performance, a celebration of disability, people just coming in, exploring that space. So this is the idea of a tree that's been cut down, and what do you see when you cut down a tree? Rings that go right into the center. It's not very clear this, but this was some of the structural drawing for the clearing. Here we can see the idea of performances. It's a space where people can come, they can get coffee, there's shelter, come out of the sun, come out of the rain, and it's also the place where the performances happen. We've designed it in such a way where we have, the space is demarcated by not curtains, but hanging strands that people can walk in through. So we have an outer level and then an inner circle that you can go into. So these strands are hanging, which means you can see something, but you're not sure what you're going into till you go inside, and then there's space above. You look up and you can see everything. So it's almost like the idea of a clearing in the forest. The more we thought about this, the more we explored some of these ideas. We wanted to have one clearing structure which was central to everything, but we also wanted to think about the entire space coming together in a cohesive whole. We wanted to have other places where people could sit down, where they could go for information. We wanted to provide a range of options, social infrastructure for people to be. That was more important to us. So that's what I'm saying. The whole is greater than the sum of the individual parts. So creating all these different elements within this square, how do we link them all together was another conversation that we had to come to. The more we looked into this, the more we realized that we wanted to take on board some of the works of Gottfried Semper, who takes a polychromatic approach. His ideas were around colors being really important to express individuality, to express the feeling of being part of the masses. Not just what we often get in architecture, which is one single, strong, dominant, stylized color. Now, this is a very crude drawing of what we were hoping is going to be much more beautiful than this, but you can see the colors there starting to appear, the polychromatic approach. What's exciting at this stage is that they are currently designing, not just designing, but putting together the furniture, and these photographs only came through yesterday. So one of the things we'd looked at was how we could improve the space, and we decided there was a lamppost, but why not put some tables on it attached to the lamppost at different levels? So one at a lower level for people in a wheelchair or any kind of chair, another one for people to put their phone on stand, and they could stand, put their phone there, and have a video call with anybody across the world. That was about bringing people in, because it's a festival, and people will come from all over the place. And you can see that we're using strong, vibrant colors here. One of the other ideas we had was we wanted to have a bicycle rack, but sometimes a bicycle rack is just taking up so much space. We have another architect with us who's deaf called Chris, and he said, wouldn't it be lovely if there were seats made as part of the bicycle rack? So you could sit beside your bicycle, put your drink down, and have a chat. So we are building this. This is currently under construction, but these are bicycle racks that have seats, which are actually a temporary thing that can go over the top of the bicycle racks and become more seating space. Can be used as, again, a place for people to engage, come together, and communicate. In the square, they have a couple of stone benches, which just added to the feeling of this being a very cold space, because they're actually cold, physically cold and hard, and also not very comfortable to sit on. So one of our ideas is to create these wooden covers, and they're being designed to fit on top of them. And then that means anybody who feels they need a bit of rest has somewhere to sit comfortably, and there's options around where people sit. So for this project, our aim really has been to make changes which in some ways are quite small, but we want people to come into this space and not feel, oh, there's the place where disabled people go. We want people to come into the festival together, to look around, to feel appreciated, to feel that it's all designed around everyone coming. On my last slide, this is a photo of the same little girl that you saw earlier on. Has grown up a little bit. She's now in primary school. She's the only deaf child in her class. 30 children, so she's the only deaf one out of 30. And the teacher handed them out different shapes, as you would do, triangles, squares, circles, just shapes, and asked the children to go ahead and make a picture out of the shapes. So you can see we've got flowers and rockets and houses. My daughter was the only one who used those shapes to make people. Her name is Erin, you can see. As soon as I saw that, it jumped out at me. I can't explain it fully, but there's something there as a deaf family where we value people and the beauty of sign language, a language that we love, that's based on eye contact, based on facial expression. where we feel as a community that that human contact, human connection is so important. There is some research being done in Sweden at the moment showing that children up to 5 years old are losing the ability to identify facial expression. And they're not able to identify whether their parents are happy or sad because of the amount of time they're spending on screens. That's terrifying, absolutely terrifying. You know, we need technology. But when we look at other cultures, we value them, we learn from them. And that's what this is about. This is about moving forward towards a more human-centric design approach. One quote from John Hume, SDLP leader some years ago in Northern Ireland, who said, "The essence of humanity is people being together." Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for coming, and I think it's great always to hear Richard describing his work and his thoughts. So we're interested in questions, if anybody has them, or any come online. I think I'm just going to add a little bit about Theatre Form and the festival, because it is, I think it's very exciting, and as Richard said, the bits and pieces for so there's this fantastic pavilion, which we haven't seen yet. I think it's been built, although the frame has been created, I think. I don't know. But the other things I think are really, there's the things that Richard described, which are just being built, which is lovely. And I think this notion, I think the connection with DisOrdinary is about this idea that you kind of disrupt and improve and adapt and just play around with space in a way that just opens up possibilities. I think it's a great example, those concrete benches that are just sort of, they're just right across this square, these very grey, cold, rectangular blocks, and that's somehow what you're meant to sit on. And the idea that you make them possible to sit on if you need a backrest, if you need some foot support, and we have there's lots of different sorts of seating. There's bean bags for people, there's a variety of ways in which you can sit, the converted bike racks, and the converted bike racks are also about the fact that the square is quite taken over with bicycles. There's a lot of people who ride through it very fast, and it's pedestrianised. But of course, for many people with impairments, that can be quite a problem. That can be actually something that's quite threatening, quite frightening, quite dangerous. So we kind of deliberately wanted to remove some of the bike racks and just make them much more sociable. And the other thing, which I think is only, we know it's a compromise solution, but because of the cobbles, there are some concrete stretches on the ground, plain concrete stretches, and we joined them together with, I can't remember what's that stuff called? No, the vinyl, vinyl.
Foil? I think they're using foil. Actually, to pull all that together.
Yeah, the foil, and that will have phrases on it, kind of disability, like deaf gain, you know, kind of very powerful phrases. So it kind of makes it a little bit easier if you use a wheelchair. It doesn't really solve the problem. It also makes it a kind of part of this much more vibrant and engaging space. We'll find out when we go at the end of June, at the end of this month. Actually looks like.
Hello, can I ask a question?
Oh yeah.
Thank you so much, Jos and Richard. That was fantastic, and it was wonderful to hear about your collaborations together, and also how you both started out yourselves individually. And I'm really interested to know from both of you why you studied architecture, and Richard, what was it like to study architecture, and also Jos, when you studied architecture, did you feel then, I suppose, a misfit in a world of modernism? So it's a question for both of you, but it's the same question, I suppose.
I'll just answer the thing about misfit, because I think that's completely on the nail. When I read that article about fitting and misfitting, it's so connected to my experience of studying architecture. And I really loved it. I really enjoyed it. I came to it by mistake. My family had no idea, and still, never really understood what being an architect was. But I got sent to a kind of careers counsellor, I think, because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And they said, well, you can restore old paintings, or you can be an architect. And I thought, I don't want to restore old paintings. So it was a very, it was kind of like, oh, in which case, obviously, that's what I'm going to be doing. And I did, I loved it in every way, but I could never quite understand what was going on. I never understood why the way you were taught it, what it had to do with everyday life. It seemed so separate from everyday life, and I guess that's why I got involved in a lot of community-based work and kind of feminist stuff. So I think that's, but then I'm still very involved in it because it's such a fascinating subject, and it's it's very nice to be involved in it slightly sideways, I think.
I think my own experience is quite different. I mean, I remember growing up as a child, my father actually brought someone in the house. I think we were getting some work done, as you do in your house, and there was a man brought in who was an architect. Now, my life has always been about lip reading, so I was trying to watch my dad and then watch this other person. My dad had a big moustache, which really didn't help very much. So I was trying to lip read these two people chatting in the house, and it was always a bit of a struggle trying to work out what they were talking about. It's like a jigsaw lip reading. You're trying to pull together bits, and sometimes you make an entirely different picture. But this architect brought in a roll of paper, and when I saw that, I was transfixed by these gorgeous perspective drawings. As soon as I saw them, I couldn't think of anything else. And I just thought the power of art to communicate ideas, a language, everything. I was enthralled from that first plan drawing that I saw. I could see where the footpath was, where the extension was going to be, everything. That was one experience that drew me in. Around that time, I can remember in school, I went to university, 1990s. Now at that time, we were pre-internet really. We weren't really in technical age, so everybody was using the phone for everything all the time, so the idea was that I couldn't possibly be an architect because I couldn't use the phone. And the only way for me to design would be communicate through drawing itself. And so for me, drawing became a mode of communication. I did art A-level at school, and as part of that, we did a school trip to Florence in Italy. And I'll never forget the day our art A-level group walked through Florence, as you do. The day you arrive in from the airport, you're tired, you're hungry, it was raining. My hearing aids weren't working because they were soaked. Everybody was making fun of everybody else, and it was just one of those days. And we walked into the square where you have Giotto's tower, and all my misery guts evaporated in the beauty of the Giotto tower. I couldn't get over the power of architecture to influence my mood. And from that moment on, I decided I wanted to be a person who could influence mood by designing buildings.
I wonder, I'd love you to talk a bit more about the experience of, other deaf architects. It's kind of, it's a small group because it's so hard to get, to actually get through the course when there's no accommodations made. And I just wondered about the kind of, how many deaf architects there are and how they survive really in an environment that's not supportive.
Yeah, I can absolutely talk to that one. And it would be quite a sad story. There are very few deaf architects out there at this point in time. And the reality is, as a deaf person, I probably have more acuity in my other senses. You compensate across your senses. We are more visual, more tactile, more sensory in many ways. We'd be ideal for being architects. Well, I am, but other deaf people would too. I went to a boarding school over in England. It was a boarding school specifically for deaf children. 10 people per class. I had a fabulous time in school, loved it. The day I went into university was a horrible culture shock. 120, 130 people in a class. If I'm honest, the first 3 years I really struggled. I could have dropped out, except I had a friend called Nigel, and I thank Nigel for everything that I've ever achieved. He sat beside me in class, he took notes for me, because in those days there was nothing, there was no communication support of any kind. Nigel did this out of the goodness of his heart, sat beside me, wrote notes, let me follow his notes. And actually going into a tutorial was very challenging. Those 3 years were hard. I went back to my 5th and 6th years, and when I did my 5th and 6th year, it was much easier. It was down to only 30 students. I could see people, and I actually enjoyed those 2 years. I didn't enjoy the first 3 years at all. Sad to say, there's a very high proportion of deaf people who go to university and drop out after that first couple of years because they struggle so much, because the education system, to be honest, is not right for deaf people. It just doesn't work for us the way it is. People standing at the front. I believe that architects need to learn by hands-on experience, by doing things. That wasn't part of my training. It was a lot of theory. And so I think that the teaching is designed in such a way that you maybe look at something else and listen. It's not designed for being deaf. And that's the kind of change that really I'd love to see changing over time. I'd love to influence that. Because, when you're deaf, you're often visual. There's a lot of us very creative. We have a lot to contribute.
Promo, but working with Richard and some other deaf architects, we're just about to develop an equivalent course to the Architecture Beyond Sight, the one for blind and visually impaired people. It may be very different, but there's an idea that also building on this notion of deaf gain and supporting deaf people who either want to be learn to be architects or who already are, maybe hard of hearing or deaf, but really struggle in the profession. And I also I do need to call out Chris Lang, who is the other deaf architect who's working particularly on the Theatre Foreman project. He is in he's doing his exams. I think he's kind of in a more lowly position in his job, so it's very hard for him to find time. And that's really interesting already. Richard has a little bit more flexibility. And to do a project outside of work that's particularly exploring these issues. And the other thing I think that's brilliant about Chris is he does, he's already doing all those things, and then he does a lot of work with deaf young people. He does mentoring and supporting, and he also, you should have a look at it, he has this thing called sign strokes, so he's developing sign language for architectural words. And the idea of that is that's part of the problem. There isn't a kind of language that's kind of well known, but also some of those signs can be very helpful for hearing people too, because if you're a first year student and somebody says cantilever to you, you've no idea what it is, you're going to have to do the sign for cantilever because I'm holding the microphone, but...
I think for me, though, there's, one of the things we can say is that surely it should be a natural language that's used for describing architecture because it is so visual. Cantilever, there you go, cantilever.
Thank you.
Yeah. The word's hard to say, the sign's much easier to produce. And research would show that we are on this planet for what? Say 500,000 years? We only started to use our vocal cords about 150,000 years ago. So how did we communicate before that? Before speech was developed? For 350,000 years. How did we communicate? Obviously people were gesturing. We still gesture. Everybody gestures. Everybody uses facial expression. Everybody does use body language. There's a French philosopher who said that our spoken language is not our natural language. And he was talking about, I don't know, I can't remember, I'm not going to get this across very well, but I think that I need to say that sign language is a natural part of our being, that we all should be encouraging other people to use it. And Chris is trying to get this vocabulary going, specific words, and how wonderful it would be if everybody had access to that. Things like lighting, all those things, all those architectural terminology which are hard to learn but actually can be signed really nicely.
Questions?
Yeah, I just wanted to say how wonderful it has been to hear the three of you, I would say, because all the first two speakers, Jos and Richard, both fantastic, but also your signer who's been so wonderful and has really interpreted so well for us all. But you made me feel excited about architecture again, both of you. I think probably Richard really crowned it. It's been so hard for years to get architects excited about what you've just been talking about. And I sometimes feel quite jaded, battling along with others. And now there is such an interest, and to see so many people here today, I think is wonderful. But I wanted to ask Richard a question about Gallaudet, because I've always wondered whether or not it is something of a time, and is it not the antithesis of inclusion in some respects? If all universities were different to what you experienced when you went to a school of architecture, if we really had a truly inclusive education system, would we need a Gallaudet or not? It's something I just don't know, and I wondered what your view on that was.
Sorry, I can't. Was that word audit that you said?
No, Gallaudet.
Oh, well, such an interesting question. It's a really big thing, actually. I think the way that I would perceive what I've seen going on in Gallaudet is that it's almost like a sacred space for deaf people across the world to believe that there is this place where when I go, I feel comfortable in my own skin. That is amazing. And you're absolutely right, yeah. We should have local universities, including everybody else. I agree with that. Please believe me. But this misfit idea that Jos has been explaining to you will always be there. Particularly when it comes to the social aspect of being a student, you're always a misfit. When you're the only deaf person going out to the pub with your mates, you can't hear them. They go into conversations which will include architecture, won't include architecture, but you can't lip read everybody chatting away at speed in a pub. You're never going to get that sense of really fitting in. And so that's why I've said I have 2 children, both of them are deaf. Both of them are currently in mainstream education. Both of them are currently the only deaf child in their class. I mean, they've actually got really nice support in place. They've got a signer there. Some of the children and their families are learning sign language, but they don't have deaf peers in their education. No one else who's deaf in their own class. And we are genuinely thinking that our children we'll move over somewhere to England to get education for our children where they'll be with other deaf children. So my experience of being in Gallaudet was that you learn more from university than just the subject that you go to learn. You learn how to be a human being, how important it is to be yourself in the world. That's part of what an education is about. I hope I've really answered your question appropriately. My apologies if I haven't.
I think it's also about, I mean, there's always the issue of how we get from here to there. And I think something I feel, I'm still embarrassed about it. I feel that I was very naive initially in that I kind of had this assumption that there weren't really disabled people in architecture and the built environment professions and education, and that, you know, this in a way it's why we needed to bring deaf and disabled artists in, because it was kind of I had this mental divide that you didn't find. And then what we did, without realizing we were doing it in many ways, is we created exactly that safe space. So out of the various events that we did and the workshops, more and more students and members of staff would tell us about their impairments, and often would start telling each other. We had students where there were some projects that we did, and we were quite careful about how we did it, where students actually admitted particular impairments to each other for the first time, and then would say that they hadn't kind of ever told their friends. Because they were, obviously we're talking about invisible disabilities where it's something that you can hide and you can pass or mask. And that to me is really interesting. It's interesting for 2 reasons. One is it relates to your question, which is we've been talking about how we can support a network of people, disabled people, deaf and disabled people in those areas. Obviously, DisOrdinary is very focused on what is it you do to just change how the built environment gets designed, because it seems such an important thing. And so we've been talking about how you might get a network together so people can just, so people can find out there are other people, so they can vent about all the frustrations, but also so they can build up a kind of sense of how that might affect how they operate both in the everyday with their peers, but also how it might affect their design. So that's a kind of thing that comes out of that notion of making a safe space. But then I think there's a reflection both on, people, I would include myself, non-disabled people. It's like we're complicit in that. I often have architects say to me, we'd love to have a disabled or deaf architect, student, but unfortunately, our office is very inaccessible. Oh, sorry. And you kind of think, well, that's it's like that's why it doesn't change. That's why we don't get to that point where we can have this education that works for everybody. We're all complicit in just letting this go on, letting this kind of ableist thoughtlessness continue. And everybody does what they can in this world, but I feel like it should be a much bigger thing in relationship to architecture. It should be a bigger thing. I don't mean that it's everything, there's loads of other stuff, but it should connect into sustainability, it should connect into how we think about technologies. There's so many things it could connect with.
If I can just jump in there, I'm really interested in what you were just saying there, because this is about changing attitudes, changing the context. But I'm currently involved in a very small scale project in Dublin, in a place called Deaf Village, Ireland. We're making adaptations to a cafe and the atrium. This is a minor project. But I used this approach with everything. We ran a workshop first, we got the feedback, And everybody kept saying the same thing to me. Hang on, Richard, you're an architect. Are you deaf? We've had architects in before, we can never communicate with them. It's the first time we've ever had one could communicate with us in our own language and everything. Their response was phenomenal. But the problem that they've had is there's a cafe area, and the cafe isn't working as a business model. It's just not working. And the problem is they see the cafe as their sacred zone for deaf people to get together and be in a wee huddle. And I've said to them, you need to physically open up your cafe so that everybody else comes in, then they see your language and you engage and you open up a little bit. And there was a bit of resistance, but you know, Irish Sign Language is a beautiful language, it really is. So why do we have to make it safe for that, to that extent? What we need to do is design spaces where other people will come in and see your language and learn that with you. And I think that's where it starts to cut both ways.
Hi. Thanks for the great talks. I wonder about if you ever work with other kinds of designers, such as industrial designers and product designers, UX designers, service designers, maybe disabled designers or not, because it's funny how the language is slightly different, who a user is slightly different, and even discourse around disability. I don't know if you know that book by Beth Williamson, came out a couple of years ago. Yeah, and which is about the design of products for disabled people, and she ties it in with the rise of consumerism and so on. And it'd be interesting to know how that maps onto architecture or not, and even ideas like you were saying misfit, and I was thinking about in service design that's often called friction, and we're used to, you know, frictionless payments and so on, and you know, the design of kind of touch points so things are no longer frictionless or materialized in the world or whatever. So I wonder, yeah, I was just wondering about, you say you're working with, your architects working with artists, and I was just wondering about other kinds of designers, and yeah. Thank you.
I think that's a really interesting question, and I think in terms of the kind of quality of work that's going on, you're right, people like design historians like Beth Williamson and that other woman, Elizabeth somebody, and then people like Sarah Hendren. You know, there's a lot of really fabulous work going on across, and some brilliant people in graphic design too, like Joel Halstead. And I guess, so I think we're kind of informed by that, but I think what's really interesting, what Zoe and I think have really enjoyed is, in our case, it's about the differences between art as creative practice and architecture as creative practice, as a form of practice, and actually those are already really very different in the way that they operate. So we've had very productive both discussions and kind of experiential workshops which are around what is it that artists do in how they develop ideas about things and often make spaces, but they're kind of in a different and often quite provocative spaces or very performative spaces. And what is it that architects do, and how can they productively learn from each other? So I agree with what you say. I think one of the things that's always been clear about the DisOrdinary Architecture Project is we're quite limited. You know, we don't talk about, I mean, we do get involved in disability rights, but we don't talk about, you know, employment rights or there's whole areas that, you know, there's lots of campaigning on that we don't talk about. And so I think, and it's almost a very mechanical thing, which is, there's a big issue with, I mean, you know, the changes in the built environment and making it more accessible are better than they were. But Zoe and I got together because we felt that it got stuck. I felt that the way that people were being taught about these things now, in 2008, was exactly how I was taught it in the 1970s. I mean, there wasn't, you know, the way that it was not dealt with was an exactly similar way that it was not dealt with. And that's, you know, that's 30, 40 years. So, like, how has nothing much changed in 30 to 40 years? And so I think this idea that we actually looked at the way that people involved in the built environment, people with power, and of course architects and other like planners and landscapers aren't that powerful in the process, but what is it that, how could one kind of make have a kind of snowballing effect with people in those roles, and not just about being better access designers, although that also needs to happen, but about really thinking about, you know, ourselves and how we operate and what we do and where we need to take more responsibility, and how we might do that in a really creative way. And I mean, it's great working with Richard. And a big thing, you know, the huge thing about DisOrdinary is it's enormous fun. We have an enormously hilarious time all the time. And, you know, disability, access and inclusion always in this terribly worthy, you know, politically correct, oh my God, we've got to be really serious here. And there was a point with the, I'll finish in a minute and let Richard speak, with the Olympics in London, the 2012 Olympics, a lot of the artists involved with DisOrdinary got quite big commissions out of that and really developed their own practice. And the whole thing went quite a bit, and actually I worked in Moscow for a bit. And then, so when I came back, I said, is anybody up for this? And it was like this chorus of like, of course we are, God, when are you going to start? Let's do it now, what should we do? Oh, isn't this? And so that sense of it being, you know, energizing, as the previous speaker said, I think for me is so, I mean, it's just so wonderful. It's just like, that's the way forward, I think. Sorry, Richard.
I think what I would pick up on is that this project work I'm doing in Deaf Village, Ireland, that I've just referred to, part of what we've been doing, sorry, let me go back a little bit. I worked for Home Ignite, an architects company in Belfast, for about 12 years. Gained very valuable experience there, but it was time for me to go out on my own. So I'm now in my own business, doing my own thing. And I have a vision that I, in the future, will develop a practice which will bring in other deaf and disabled architects in the future, to give them a platform where I can start to mentor and train and develop them. That's my vision. Because I am so clear that there is so much creativity which is untapped out there. But in this DVI project, there's a deaf graphic designer going in to do the branding for this new cafe, which is fantastic. And what I'm seeing from them is a perspective which is actually very different from my own in terms of branding. And I think there really is a beauty of bringing, again, I've talked about diversity previously, but I think it is around diversity. People do generate more ideas when they come from different backgrounds. That kind of idea of bringing that creativity together is excellent. I mean, everybody nowadays loves to text. It actually came from the deaf community in Finland. That's where the original idea came from, because they kept moaning about the fact that every phone required you to be able to talk and make phone calls. And so they came up with the idea of texting. Well, I imagine a few of you in the room probably use texting a little bit. But that came from the deaf community because they just wanted direct contact. There's something about it which is immediate, isn't it? And so now everybody's on WhatsApp and Instagram, doing what else. And that came from the deaf community. That's deaf gain for you. But when you talk about, sorry, I don't go on too much, but the deaf community, and there was some work done in Dublin, I think it's about 10 years ago, I'm sorry, I don't know actually which university it was, but there were some puzzles put out, two groups of people. One group, the people were deaf, and the other ones they weren't, and they timed who could do the puzzles faster. And strangely enough, the deaf group completed the puzzles faster. Now, perceptions would have you thinking it would be the other way around. However, what ended up happening was the deaf group communicated really fast. They got to the point, and the communication actually in sign language, visual language, visually motivated, actually is fairly fast, and they communicated really fast. They just did. And my observation, sorry, those of you who aren't deaf, is there's a bit more waffle goes on, and it took them longer to do the puzzles. So that's just what can happen, is that there's so much potential that we can tap if we can bring people in.
Hello. We have just one more question, if that's okay, and then we'll call it a night. But I think it's...
Hi, thank you. Thank you all. Really, it's really interesting. Yeah, it was a really lovely night. One of the things I loved was when you were describing your beautiful public space, and you were talking about how this bench was just a bench, and you looked at it, and it is not something designed for a disabled person. It just happens to facilitate a wider range of people in society, right? So I really loved that idea, and it's so obvious, right, that that should be the way we design our spaces and buildings. My question for both of you is, what do you think are the main, barriers or obstacles to that thinking being in the mainstream design of our public spaces and buildings, and how do you think those barriers could be overcome? If you have any opinions on that, I'd be really interested.
I'm not sure this is answering your question exactly, but I think for me, one of the things that's come up more and more, even from the early days by working with deaf and disabled artists, is that the kind of set of ways that, and I'm only focusing on, you know, the architects, not other designers and their ways of working, and I'm not focusing on, you know, the clients and the people with the money who have a huge impact, and the developers, you know, all those things. But in terms of the actual design, the first thing that came up in the very early project we did, which was called Making Discursive Spaces, and we brought 5 deaf and disabled tutors into a design course to work alongside non-disabled tutors, and just to teach in the, you know, in parallel, and to look at what that meant and to see how that might be something that was feasible to do. And the major problem was that it was felt very threatening by the tutors. The students loved it. But the feedback was from the artist was, I don't understand how architects work. Why do they deal with these like big concepts and these kind of abstract ideas, and then they get into the detail? Why don't we start from our human bodies and our human minds and our variety and work outwards? And there may be some really good reasons for that, but it was like, for me, that was like, that's a really good point. And I think those benches in the square in Braunschweig, to me, having trained as an architect, is I can see the designers, landscape designers or the architects doing that. They're like God, because you know, you draw plans and sections and elevations. You draw in a way that lifts you above and you look down, and then it's a really beautiful shape in the square. It's like, in the plan, it looks gorgeous. And I do think, and it's not, I'm not criticizing architects because it's a really hard job to do, but I think there is a kind of sense where the kind of drawing techniques that we use, even now that we use computers, just have some sort of, you know, but there's some real problem in the way that those work. So this is a very different thing. This is what I mean about models of new practice. It's like, maybe we shouldn't be just talking about, oh, we're not doing it properly, you know, we're not thinking about inclusive design. Maybe we were just saying, we're using some really odd design methods in the first place. You know, they were developed in the Renaissance, one point perspective. They were about all sorts of things which are no longer kind of how we think and how we occupy space. So I think for me that's, and then the very visual aspect of that, which I mentioned before. So there's a kind of, and I've had diploma students, that is people in the final stages of their architectural courses, saying, how wide is a door again? And I'm like, there's a door over there, how wide is that door? And they're like, no, just tell me, how wide is it on the plan? And I'm like, how wide are you? And they're like, no, just tell me, I just need to draw this door correctly. And that kind of, I do think, and I'd be interested to know what Richard feels about this, but my education felt that it was about a kind of, something happened where you actually got moved further away from the kind of messy everyday in the way that you learn what architecture is. So that may not answer your question, but that to me is there's a kind of big thing in that has become increasingly interesting.
Yeah, I do agree. I think when I was a young architect, the whole process is design first, then go through your checklists, make sure you've covered everything you were told you had to cover, and it's all back to front. We need to be thinking about the people occupying the space first, understand what their needs are for that space first before we go into the design process. When I worked with Hall McKnight, we designed a building in Belfast called a transport hub. And what drove the narrative for that transport hub was, at the very start, we met the local community. It was a specific community in West Belfast. There's a lot of social deprivation in that area, a lot of issues in this particular area that the transport hub was being designed for. And so we went out to meet the local people. And when we went out, we met a girl from the area who went to Queen's University. Now, coming from that area, that was an achievement. She was the first in her family. She was thrilled to bits. When she got into the university, she was so overwhelmed by the civic style of the architecture, by the environment that she was in, that she felt so uncomfortable that she couldn't fit with that space. It was so different from everything that she knew that she left the course after 3 months. And that drove our design for the community hub to make it a world-class building, which is what we said it would be, which was a resource that that community would actually be proud of. And throughout that design process, we went for really high quality materials, an excellent finish. And that is, you know, we wanted that to be the catalyst for other buildings in the area. And it was in a building that did win awards at the end of that. But her story drove that.